Hello people, it is Natalie Kunsman, MD, and for the past 24 years as a family physician and board certified in functional medicine, I encounter depression on a daily basis, no matter if it was my home state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, or currently Colorado where I am practicing. So I know if I'm encountering this with such regularity, if some of you viewers aren't depressed, I guarantee that a parent, a sibling, a family member, a friend, or a coworker is depressed. So listen up. Depression is a mood disturbance that is defined in our psychiatric Bible, the DSM-5, and we think of it with mood symptoms such as sadness, loneliness, poor concentration, low mood. But then there are also vegetative symptoms, which are from the mind-body connection, and that may be slow movements, which we call psychomotor retardation, excessive sleeping, excessive eating, or poor eating. The demeanor and the posture is poor, or lack of motivation. So depression in adults, I will assess for underlying medical conditions that could be contributing. So there may be things such as sugars or diabetes, thyroid, chronic illnesses, substance abuse, and several others. There may actually be stress or psychological triggers. And by far and away, the number one trigger that I have seen throughout the years is work. So there are several others, and this is not a comprehensive list, but it might be deployment, death, separation or divorce, a childhood illness or one of your children's illness, a spouse that is ill, money troubles, and victimization. Now, depression in kids may present itself or may be triggered by different things, but in a similar category, such as victimization, neglect, abuse. Some children may have been born with this type of disposition, but there may actually be some medications they may be taking for other conditions that may actually be rendering them somewhat depressed. A poor diet, being in low socioeconomic conditions, poor school performance, and peer pressures. So step number one is to identify it. I need to usually assess the severity, and by all means, we have to figure out if the patient or you are about to cause harm to oneself or to others. And if that is going on, that completely trumps any of the wellness techniques that we may be discussing today. So that may actually require emergency psych evaluations or hospitalizations to stabilize the condition. So let's start with my first tactic, and that is the diet. We need to remove neuroexcitotoxins. So some of these, and we've discussed this in our obesity and detox discussions, but some of them can be food dyes, aspartame, MSG, and actually some certain medications, and these are very toxic to the brain. So let's digress or move over to the dietary integration of brain chemistry and the foods that we were eating. So I tell all of my patients, whether they are young or whether they are old, that a carbohydrate and a sugar junkie has no building blocks to make our neurochemistry And one of the biggest chemicals is serotonin. And of course, we have dopamine and norepinephrine as well. So sugar is a neuroexcitotoxin. So just watch a little kid after you feed him a chocolate candy bar, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And I often say, if you never have one more cube of sugar the rest of your life, you will never die of a sugar deficiency. So we have a serotonin plexus in the gut, and we are now believing that that is our first brain because of our gut reaction many times or most times precedes our brain's awareness, as many studies have shown. Now, we have the vagus nerve from the gut area that is shuttling this chemistry toward the brain, but then it can also, the brain can shuttle it back down to the gut. Now, we create serotonin from amino acids, and amino acids are highest in the tryptophan category, which is what you will find in your chicken and your turkey. So to explain this, we will have tryptophan, which will convert to 5-HTP, then serotonin, then melatonin. So we have a lot of brain chemistry that is heavily reliant on L-tryptophan. Now we can't forget the gut bacteria. They are responsible for producing GABA, and GABA is a relaxant, or it helps to reduce anxiety and create a calming effect, which is helpful in depression. The gut bacteria also make short-chain fatty acids, and butyrate is probably one of the best known and best researched at this point. And they will make these short-chain fatty acids by ingesting fiber. So please, we need plenty of fiber, and that comes from our plant family. Our gut bacteria are also crucial for the immune system, and if the immune system winds up being pro-inflammatory, it can make too much LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, and that high LPS is associated with depression, dementia, and schizophrenia. So now we have some new terminology making its way into the literature. So there's a new term for some probiotics which can help modify or moderate depression. One of those probiotics that's being studied is Bifidum longum. So those probiotics that are helpful are considered psychobiotics. Omega-3, which is found in fish and high quantities of our brain, are increased when we have some of this good bacteria in our gut system. There are also a lot of benefits to polyphenols in helping us promote our brain chemistry, and some of those are what is in cocoa, green tea, olive oil, and coffee. And again, do not forget tryptophan. You can find some tryptophan in nuts, but again, don't forget the lean, good meats. So even the Cleveland Clinic endorses integrative therapies for depression management, and some are herbal remedies. So we have St. John's wort, which winds up being a natural serotonin compound from an herb named St. John's wort. We have 5-HTP, ginkgo biloba, SAMe, and L-theanine. And again, this is coming from the Cleveland Clinic. Fish oils, we cannot forget them. They are good for so many things, but of course when it comes to our brain health and depression, we need to focus on the DHA component of fish oils, and if we could get up to about 2,000 milligrams a day, that would be extremely beneficial. we may want to be balancing our hormones to help with depression. And we had a previous discussion about this and strong consideration for bioidentical hormone replacement. Sunlight for vitamin D therapy is absolutely essential to our brain health, and in particular, obviously, our mood. Then we have energy medicine for helping to treat depression. Energy medicine is very encompassing, but some that are very familiar to us at this point are acupuncture, reflexology, Reiki, and there are some newer techniques such as the NES system. And I want to talk about a newer upcoming therapy for pretty severe depression, and that's called TMS, or repetitive TMS. And TMS is actually standing for transcranial magnetic stimulation. And that's where we're using almost a helmet of sorts that is using coils to generate magnetic resonance as strong as an MRI machine. And clinics, even such as Johns Hopkins, are using them for those who don't tolerate medications. Now, not that long ago, we were using some energy for depression that was severe, and we are familiar with the term electroshock therapy. So that was a very strong electric current, and it was so strong that people had to undergo anesthesia to be able to tolerate it. And it is still used for some very tough refractory cases, but it has a lot of side effects. And I have treated some patients that went through this, and they will talk about the memory impairments and the short-term memory impairments they have, and even the sensation that they lost their personality. And that's probably because the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex were so at risk to the electricity. Now, the NIH has also published articles that ran some head-to-head studies on pulsed EMF, or pulsed electromagnetic frequencies. And so they did some studies where they had pulsed EMF group of patients against sham pulsed EMF, low frequency, or I should say low intensity pulsed EMF. And they found that there is actually some benefit to aid in depressive symptoms. Now, if I can't emphasize enough about the benefits of exercise, please listen closely. Exercise does not only help with oxygenating the brain, which is what we thought its primary goal was in the past, and not only does it increase those wonderful endorphins, but we now know that exercise is promoting BDNF. BDNF is standing for brain-derived growth neurotrophic factor. And studies have shown that depressed people have low amounts of BDNF, and there's a very high concentration of BDNF in the hippocampus, which is mandatory for us to have a short-term memory bank, and in the prefrontal cortex, which helps us with our personality and our mood. So it is low in those patients, but exercise can actually increase that, and exercise is mandatory for brain health and not just body health. We have some simple techniques such as meditation, and you got it. Meditation will also increase the BDNF in those people who meditate regularly, and it only takes about a month for that to start improving, and there have been studies to improve that pre and post meditation. Now, the other thing about meditation, as a sidebar, is it can also slow down or quiet the cortisol response, which is that awakening response or that fight and flight response. And meditation does a grand job of decreasing that. So, we are not finished with some of the integrative techniques to help with depression. Massage is wonderful for some of the release of relaxants and GABA, but also human touch. Guided imagery. Yoga. Yoga can actually basically meet you where you are, such that it may calm you if you are wired, but also energize you if you are down. Just as important as exercise is as important as sleep is. Again, rich, restorative sleep helps promote our growth hormone, which helps with our cellular repair, and will pull that cortisol down to where it should be to help us with our regeneration. One of my favorite topics is music and sound therapy. Now, I recently attended a gong bath, which had celestial gongs vibrating these wonderful ethereal sounds throughout the space, throughout the body, and even with some crystal resonance, and that really created an awakened experience. Brain entrainment to pulsed EMF, such as your alpha, beta, theta, and delta waves of our normal brainwave activity, is also very helpful to relieve depressive symptoms and create a wonderful feeling of wellness thereafter. Now, art therapy, which are the visual arts, is also wonderful to release energy, to go to a creative space in your mind, distract from any negative thoughts that are creeping up into the brain, promoting the depressive features. That does wonders for depression symptoms. Staying involved and having responsibility has been proven to help mitigate some of the symptoms of depression. And part of that sometimes is distracting or getting outside of your awareness of depression. And for kids in particular, part-time jobs are wonderful ways to help with their depression. Another approach to helping with depressive symptoms is doing something new. And I can't say enough about this to help as a regenerative, fresh outlook on life. And you might even want to start looking for like-minded people in groups and hobbies. And I know a very favorite, easy way to go about that is to look at the Meetup apps that are out there to find your people and find your community. I wholeheartedly believe in therapy, and a great person to be able to talk to, create alternative ways other than medications to help with your depressive features. Now, of course, I need to speak a little bit about medications, and there are several categories. There are SSRIs, and some typical ones are Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, things that are almost becoming second nature in our vernacular. And then there's atypicals, there are tricyclics, and there are some other mood stabilizers, and Wellbutrin, which is an aminoketone, and some of the newer approaches to the medication topic is to assess with blood work to see almost like a genetic composition of which of those categories of antidepressants may work well in your system to see which one is best suited. So it may not necessarily have to be a trial and error approach. Sometimes we need medications in combination such that maybe one may not be enough to get the job done. Or some of them may need to take care of the mood, but the other portion may need to take care of some of those vegetative symptoms that we talked about in the beginning. And what I like to tell people is we are learning that the brain is neuroplastic. So years ago, we thought if you were on an antidepressant, that was it. You needed it for the rest of your life. And that is not necessarily so, because what a lot of the medications are designed at doing is not necessarily giving an unusual chemical, but it is allowing our own serotonin to stay within the synapses so that hopefully over time, the brain will do enough patterning and do what's called selective pruning to hardwire that brain to do it for itself so that the medications can get weaned. So it does not mean that medications are a life sentence. Now, you might need medications for some critical crisis proportions with the idea that you are still going after the correction with some of those underlying life issues. And I like to tell people that medication will not correct a bad life, but it might be able to make you more resilient to some of the assaults coming into the body and the mind. And when the body is in stress mode, it can only stay there for so long before there is some adrenal fatigue and exhaustion of just secreting so much cortisol on a daily basis. In other words, in such fight and flight mode on a consistent basis. And that in and of itself may need some treatment. And that high cortisol can start leading itself to other organ-related issues. And this is where people talk about stress causing heart attacks and stress causing strokes. So I would say that a good start when you're starting to feel down is to start with your family physician to help you strategize. Go for the integrative approach. Fix your life. Find me, find us. We are here to help. Please subscribe to my channel below. Leave comments. I will be happy to get back to you. And until we meet again, be well.